A whisper can travel across a stone hall and feel like a secret spoken directly into your ear. That strange power is not an accident, but a clue to one of history's great unsolved puzzles. We are about to explore the ancient use of acoustic resonance in temples, a mystery where hard science meets lost spirituality. By the end, you will understand how entire civilizations engineered their sacred spaces to manipulate sound and mind. How did builders with no microphones create chambers that sing? What did priests know about sound that we are only now rediscovering? The answers lie in stone. What is the most powerful sound you have ever felt? This invisible force is a fundamental rule of our physical world. To understand the temples, we first need to understand the principle of acoustic resonance. Think of a child on a swing. If you give a small push at just the right moment at the peak of each swing's arc, the child will go higher and higher with very little effort from you. That is resonance. You are matching the natural rhythm of the system and the energy builds. Now apply that idea to sound. Sound is not magic, it is a pressure wave moving through the air like ripples on a pond. Every object, every space has a natural frequency at which it prefers to vibrate. Tap a wine glass and it rings with a specific pure note. That is its resonant frequency. If you sing that exact note loudly enough near the glass, the sound waves from your voice will push the glass at its perfect rhythm. The energy transfers, the vibrations amplify, and the glass can even shatter. Now scale that idea up from a glass to a cathedral. A vast stone chamber is not a single object, but a complex space with its own set of resonant frequencies, determined by its dimensions, its shape, the materials of its walls. When someone speaks or chants inside it, certain notes of their voice will match those room frequencies. Those notes do not fade away. They are reinforced, amplified, and sustained. They linger in the air, sometimes for several seconds, becoming louder and richer than all the other sounds. This is how a whisper can be heard clearly 100 feet away. This is how a single voice can sound like a chorus. The builders were not just stacking stones, they were tuning spaces like giant musical instruments, creating rooms that would sing back to you. With that key in hand, the locked doors of history's quietest temples begin to creak open. This mastery of resonance was not a secret held by a single, isolated culture. From the sun-baked temples of Malta to the echoing pyramids of Mesoamerica, from the oracles of ancient Greece to the carved cave shrines of India, we find the same phenomenon. These civilizations were separated by vast oceans and thousands of years with no known contact, and yet they arrived at the same profound conclusion. They all learned to shape stone to shape sound, and through sound to shape human experience. This cannot be a coincidence. It points to a shared discovery, a universal truth about the relationship between vibration, architecture, and the human spirit. Each culture expressed this knowledge through its own architectural language, adapting the principle to its gods, its rituals, and its landscape. What they built were not just places of worship, but carefully tuned instruments for consciousness. To walk into one of these spaces was to step inside a resonant chamber designed to alter your state of mind, to make the divine feel audible, and to transform a solitary prayer into a chorus felt in your bones. The question is no longer if they did it, but how they achieved such precision without our modern tools, and why the effect was so important to them all. Perhaps the most famous echo from antiquity comes from a mountainside in Greece. At the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, the voice of the gods was said to speak through a mortal woman, the Pythia. She would sit on a tripod over a deep fissure in the rock, breathe in vapors rising from the earth, and fall into a sacred frenzy. In this trance, she would utter cryptic phrases that priests would then interpret for kings and commoners who had traveled from across the known world. For centuries, historians focused on those vapors, speculating they were intoxicating gases like ethylene seeping from the geological fault. But while the gases might explain our altered state, they do not explain the transformation of her voice or the overwhelming atmosphere of the chamber itself. This is where the sound of the place enters the story. The inner sanctuary where the Pythia performed her rituals was a small, stone-walled chamber called the adyton. Recent archaeological studies and acoustic modeling suggest this space was not a quiet, cloistered room. It was likely a resonant cavity. Imagine her voice, already strained and rhythmic in her trance, bouncing off the close, hard surfaces. Specific frequencies would have been amplified and sustained, creating a halo of sound around her. Her words would have been layered with their own echoes, becoming blurred, multiplied, and difficult to pinpoint. To a petitioner standing in an antechamber, listening through a veil or a doorway, her voice would not have sounded entirely human. It would have seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, shimmering in the air, disconnected from the woman herself. The resonance would have transformed her utterances into something uncanny, a sound that felt both within the room and beyond it. This acoustic effect did not just amplify volume, it manufactured presence. It built the divine aura around the oracle, making the experience less about understanding her words clearly and more about feeling the power in the room. The prophecy may have been in the meaning, but the belief was in the sound. Modern acoustic analysis gives us the tools to listen back through time. Researchers have taken the known dimensions of the adyton, its small size and hard limestone walls, and modeled its sonic behavior. What they found is a space acoustically primed for transformation. The room had a remarkably long reverberation time, meaning sound did not just bounce, it lingered and swam in the air for several seconds. More importantly, it had strong resonant frequencies in the low end of the human voice range, around 110 Hz. This is the deep, resonant tone of a baritone chant. When the Pythia spoke or chanted in that range, the room would have actively reinforced those specific frequencies. Her voice would have gained a powerful, booming undertone that felt more like a vibration in the chest than a sound in the ear. For the priests and petitioners outside, her words would arrive layered with their own ghostly echoes, a second or two behind the original utterance. A single sentence would smear into itself, becoming a cascade of overlapping sound. This acoustic phenomenon is what we might now call a sound bath, an immersive environment where the very air seems charged with vibration. For the Pythia inside that stone box, the effect would have been overwhelming. The sound of her own voice, amplified and fed back to her by the walls, would have filled her senses, disorienting her and deepening her trance state. For those listening from the antechamber, the result was a voice stripped of its human origin. It seemed to emanate from the stone itself, a detached, omnipresent resonance that felt divine. The architecture did not just house the ritual, it performed it. The stone became the second speaker, transforming a mortal woman's frenzy into the disembodied voice of a god. The Oracle of Delphi shows us how resonance could cloak a human voice in mystery, but far earlier and in a far darker place, an entire civilization built a temple to the power of sound itself. Deep beneath the island of Malta lies the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a subterranean world carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago. This is not a simple burial cave. It is a vast, three-level labyrinth of chambers, halls, and passages descending into the earth, a necropolis where thousands of the dead were laid to rest. The air is cool and still, the only light what we bring with us. Walking its corridors feels less like exploring a ruin and more like intruding into a silent stone organ. And in the heart of this darkness, sound comes alive in a way that defies simple explanation. Archaeologists and acoustic engineers have identified one particular chamber, now called the Oracle Room, as an acoustic masterpiece. Its curved walls and domed ceiling are not merely decorative. They are precisely shaped to capture and amplify a very specific sound. When a man speaks or chants in a deep tone within this room, something extraordinary happens. The chamber resonates powerfully at a frequency around 110 Hz, the fundamental pitch of a low male voice. the sound does not just echo. It amplifies, filling the small space with a booming vibration that you do not just hear with your ears. You feel it in your chest, in the pit of your stomach, and through the soles of your feet. The very stone floor seems to hum. For the Neolithic people who built this place, people without any concept of acoustic science, this effect would have been pure magic. In the flickering light of oil lamps, with the bones of ancestors lining the walls, a priest's chant would have been transformed. His voice would have seemed to emerge from the earth, a tangible, physical force that shook the participants to their core. This was not an accidental byproduct of digging a hole. The precision required to carve a room that resonates so perfectly at a human frequency indicates a deliberate, sophisticated understanding. They were not just burying their dead, they were using sound in its most visceral form to bridge the gap between the world of the living and the world of the spirits, making the unseen forces of the afterlife something you could literally feel in your bones. The profound resonance of the oracle room was not for casual conversation. In that silent, subterranean world, sound was the ritual. We can reconstruct a scene from 5,000 years ago. A small group gathers in the cramped chamber, their bodies pressed against cool limestone walls lined with the bones of generations. The air is thick with the smell of earth and burning oil. A priest, or perhaps a shaman, begins a low, rhythmic chant, his voice finding that perfect resonant frequency of the room. Instantly, the space answers. His single voice multiplies, becoming a chorus that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. The vibration is no longer just heard, it is a physical pressure on the chest, a hum in the teeth. This was likely a form of sonic driving, a practice known across many ancient cultures where repetitive sound and rhythm are used to alter consciousness, to induce trance states. The architecture guaranteed the effect. Every chant, every strike of a drum or clap of stones would be amplified and drawn out by the chamber, creating an inescapable, immersive soundscape. The participants would have been bathed in this energy, their own heartbeats and breathing perhaps syncing with the pervasive rhythm. In this altered state, the boundary between the living and the ancestral dead lining the walls would have felt paper-thin. Communication was not about words, but about shared vibration. The ritual used sound to make the spiritual tangible, to feel the presence of the ancestors in a way that was direct and physical. But there is another, even more subtle layer to this acoustic design, one that operates below the level of conscious hearing. This is the realm of infrasound, sound waves with frequencies so low, below about 20 Hz, that the human ear cannot detect them. We cannot hear infrasound, but our bodies can absolutely sense it. At certain intensities, these inaudible waves can cause feelings of deep unease, anxiety, a sense of impending dread, or even euphoria and spiritual awe. They can make your vision blur, your stomach churn, or create a profound feeling that something immense and unseen is present. Natural sources include earthquakes, storms, and even some large animals. Crucially, the specific dimensions and shape of a carved stone chamber like the oracle room can generate and amplify infrasound from something as simple as a deep drumbeat or the sustained chant of a low voice. The builders of the Hypogeum, through generations of trial and error working with the limestone, may have stumbled upon these effects. They would not have had a scientific explanation, but they would have observed the results. They would have seen how certain chants in certain rooms produced powerful, inexplicable emotional and physical reactions in people. The trembling in the limbs, the hair standing on end, the overwhelming feeling of a presence. In their worldview, these were not acoustic phenomena. They were the literal vibrations of the spirit world, made manifest through ritual sound. Their intuitive mastery of resonance extended into a spectrum of vibration they could feel but never hear, engineering experiences of sacred terror and transcendence that were written not in text but in the very shape of the stone. The silent chambers of Malta give way to the sun-drenched plazas of the Maya. Far across the world and millennia later, another civilization encoded a message in stone and sound, one that still speaks to anyone who visits. At the heart of the ancient city of Chichen Itza stands El Castillo, the Pyramid of Kukulkan, a massive step pyramid that dominates the landscape. Its 4 staircases, each with 91 steps, rise steeply to a temple at the top. To the eye, it is a monument of geometry and celestial alignment, but stand at the base of that staircase and clap your hands once sharply. What returns is not a simple echo. It is a strange, fluttering chirp that cascades down the stone steps, a sound utterly unlike the source. This is the famous Quetzal bird echo, and it is no accident of ruin. The physics behind it is both elegant and intentional. Each step of the staircase is a hard, protruding edge. When the sound wave from your clap hits the steps, it does not reflect back as a single unit. Instead, it fractures. The wave breaks apart, scattering across each individual step like light hitting a prism. Each step returns a tiny, delayed reflection of the initial sound. Your ear receives not one echo, but a rapid, rippling series of them, one after another, separated by mere milliseconds. This sequence of micro-echoes blends together to create a new, composite sound with a distinct pitch and texture. The precise spacing of the steps acts as a natural diffraction grating, tuned by the builders to transform a hand clap into the sacred call of the Quetzal. This bird, with its iridescent green feathers, was deeply revered, considered a manifestation of the god Kukulkan himself, the feathered serpent. So what does it mean when a pyramid answers your clap with the voice of a god? For the Maya, this was not a parlor trick. It was a direct participatory miracle. A worshipper at the base performing a ritual clap or shout during a ceremony would have been answered by the very temple. The stone itself would sing back with the voice of the divine serpent descending from the heavens. The architecture guaranteed that the people did not just see symbols of their god on the carved friezes. They could hear his presence, a tangible, audible proof that the boundary between the human and the divine was thin, and that the pyramid itself was alive with his spirit. The sound was an engineered revelation, making faith an experience you could create with your own 2 hands. But the pyramid's voice was not the only acoustic wonder in that city. A short walk from El Castillo lies another, even more astonishing feat of sonic engineering, the Great Ball Court. It is the largest and most impressive of its kind ever discovered, a colossal eye-shaped arena flanked by towering parallel walls that stretch over 500 feet in length. The scale is meant to overwhelm, to make the players and spectators feel small within a ritual space of immense importance. The game played here was far more than sport. It was a sacred reenactment of cosmic battles, often tied to myths of creation, the cycles of the sun, and the journey to the afterlife. The heavy rubber ball, representing the sun itself, could not be touched with hands or feet, only struck with hips, elbows, and knees to send it through a high stone ring on the wall. The outcome could decide the fate of cities, and sometimes it is believed the captain of the losing team would pay the ultimate price. In this arena of life, death, and celestial drama, sound was a crucial player. Stand at one end of that vast, open field and have a companion stand at the opposite end, over a football field away. Speak in a normal tone and your words are lost to the wind. But lean close to the massive stone wall and whisper directly into its surface. Something impossible happens. Your whisper, soft and secretive, travels along the smooth, vertical face of the wall. It does not spread out and dissipate. The architecture guides it, focusing the sound waves and channeling them down the length of the court like a whisper traveling through a stone pipe. Your companion, with their ear near the wall at the far end, will hear your words with startling clarity, as if you were standing right beside them. This is not an echo. It is a form of acoustic projection, a whispering gallery effect created by the precise geometry and sheer, unbroken scale of the walls. For the Maya, this would have been pure magic with a profound purpose. Imagine the high priest or a court announcer positioned at one end, perhaps in a designated temple structure. By speaking toward the wall, he could project his voice across the entire arena without shouting, his declarations or ritual chants delivered with an eerie, disembodied clarity to thousands of spectators. The sound would seem to emanate from the stone itself, from the very bones of the sacred arena. During the game itself, the slap of the rubber ball against a player's hip, the collective gasp of the crowd, the chants and drum beats, all these sounds would have been captured and reflected by the great walls, creating a chaotic, immersive soundscape that amplified the tension and spectacle. But the Whispering Gallery offered something more intimate and terrifying. It could have been used to deliver secret instructions to priests or to stage dramatic revelations, making it seem as though the gods themselves were whispering judgments from the stones. In a ritual where the boundary between game and cosmic struggle was blurred, this acoustic trick transformed the architecture into an active participant, ensuring that every word, every chant, and every sound was not just heard, but felt as a direct message from the realm the ball court was built to honor. The stone whispers of temples found their echo in the open air, in the communal heart of ancient Greek society. High on a hillside in Epidaurus, a theater carved from the earth holds a secret that has baffled visitors for over 2,000 years. A performer standing on the circular stage, the orchestra, can speak in a normal, conversational voice, and a spectator sitting in the very last row, over 150 feet away and nearly 80 feet higher, can hear every syllable with crystal clarity. No microphone, no electronic aid, just human breath and carved limestone. This is not merely good acoustics, it is acoustic perfection, and it was achieved with an almost supernatural understanding of how sound moves through space. The first, most obvious feature is the theater's majestic slope. The semi-circular seating area, the koilon, is steeply inclined. This certainly helps as it brings the audience's ears into a more direct line with the stage. But a steep hill alone cannot explain the phenomenon. Many modern amphitheaters built on slopes fail to achieve this effect. The genius of Epidaurus lies in the intricate details of its construction. The rows of limestone seats are not just benches, they act as a series of precise acoustic filters. The careful spacing and the sharp, vertical front of each row create a natural diffraction effect, similar to the steps of the Mayan pyramid but on a grander scale. When sound waves from the stage hit these rows, they are not simply absorbed or reflected randomly. The rows scatter the high-frequency sounds, the consonants that give speech its clarity, upward toward the audience. Meanwhile, the low-frequency waves travel directly. This combination ensures that the full richness of the human voice, from the deep emotion to the sharp detail of every word, reaches the furthest listener. Even the stage building behind the actors, the skene, played a role. Its solid, flat surface acted as a sounding board, reflecting the voice forward into the embrace of the stone bowl. Every element was tuned, a conscious design to make the invisible visible, to make a whisper into a shared truth for thousands. This was not engineering for entertainment alone. The theater at Epidaurus was a sacred precinct dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, and the dramatic performances were deeply tied to the worship of Dionysus. Drama itself was born from ritual, from choral hymns sung to honor the gods. The theater was in essence an outdoor temple for sonic communion. The perfect acoustics served a spiritual purpose. They ensured that the tragic verses of Aeschylus or the comedic barbs of Aristophanes were not just heard, but felt as a collective experience. When the actor's voice carried effortlessly to the highest seat, it broke down the barrier between the individual and the community. The citizen in the top row, who might feel distant and removed, was drawn into the same emotional current as the noble in the front. The architecture enforced a democratic purity of sound, where every word of the poet's dialogue, every lesson about fate, hubris, and the divine, landed with equal weight on every ear. In this sacred space, resonance was not used to summon spirits or induce a private trance, as in the Hypogeum. Here, it was harnessed to amplify the human condition, to project the complexities of myth and morality across an entire city-state gathered on a hillside. The stone was shaped to elevate the human voice to the level of the divine, making the stories of gods and heroes a visceral, shared reality. It turned the act of listening into an act of collective participation in a ritual that was both art and prayer. The flawless acoustics were the medium through which the mortal audience could connect with the timeless dramas unfolding before them, a technological marvel in service of the soul. From the open-air democracy of Greek theatre, we travel to a world where sound is woven directly into the geometry of the divine. In the soaring stone forests of South India's ancient temples, the principle of resonance finds its most intricate and intentional architectural expression. Here, the focal point is not a stage or an oracle's chamber, but the vimana. This is the towering, often pyramidal superstructure that rises majestically over the innermost sanctum, the womb chamber where the deity resides. At first glance, it is a breathtaking feat of sculpture covered in countless carved figures and symbolic motifs, layer upon layer reaching for the heavens. But to see only the art is to miss half the design. The vimana is also a colossal, finely tuned acoustic instrument. Its form is not solid. It is typically built as a series of hollow, stacked stone shells, creating a complex internal cavity that ascends directly above the sacred idol. This hollow tower was not an empty space by accident. It was a resonant column, a vertical chamber engineered to capture and transform specific sounds from the rituals below. When a priest chants a mantra in the sanctum's enclosed space, his voice rises. The sound waves travel upward, entering the base of the vimana. Inside that stone labyrinth, they begin to behave in extraordinary ways. The carefully calculated dimensions, the angles of the interior walls, and the series of constrictions and expansions act like a natural sound processor. They filter and amplify the chant, particularly the fundamental tones and overtones considered most sacred. The sound does not just vanish into the ceiling. It swirls within the tower, resonating, gaining strength and texture, before being projected back downward and outward, suffusing the entire temple interior with a sustained, vibrational hum. The same principle applies to the ringing of ritual bells. A single strike does not produce a brief ting. It initiates a cascade of resonance that fills the hollow vimana, the sound blooming and lingering in the air for many seconds. The architecture guarantees that every sacred utterance, every resonant ring, is magnified and made omnipresent. This was the clear intent. The ancient builders, the Esthapathes, operated under a profound spiritual science called Vastu Shastra. In this system, a temple is not merely a building. It is a living energy body, a bridge between the earthly and the cosmic. Sound vibration, or nada, is understood as a fundamental creative force, the very stuff of the universe. Therefore, the act of worship is not just visual or mental. It is deeply sonic and vibrational. The purpose of the resonating vimana was to create a total sonic environment, a bath of purified vibration believed to accomplish two sacred goals. First, to literally purify the space, driving out stagnant or negative energies with the physically cleansing waves of sacred sound. Second, and more profoundly, to elevate the consciousness of everyone within the temple. The sustained, immersive resonance was designed to entrain brain waves, to calm the chatter of the mind, and to facilitate a state of deep meditation and connection. The worshipper is not just hearing a chant, they are being enveloped by it, physically vibrated by the architecture itself, which acts as a giant amplifier for prayer. In these temples, the stone was not a passive backdrop. The entire vimana was an active participant in the ritual, a machine built by human hands to harness the invisible power of sound and use it to reshape human awareness, to make the intangible presence of the divine something you could feel vibrating in the air and in your very bones. The whispering walls of southern India hold another secret, one you can play with your own two hands. In the ancient temple complexes, you will find clusters of stone pillars that are not merely supports, they are instruments. The most famous stand in the ruins of Hampi at the Vitala temple dedicated to Lord Vishnu. Here, in the magnificent Ranga Mandapa or musical hall, you are surrounded by a forest of slender, carved pillars. At first glance, they appear as exquisite examples of Hoysala architecture, covered in intricate sculptures of deities, warriors, and mythical beasts. But their true magic is hidden in their composition. The main load-bearing pillar is thick and central. Around it, arranged in a circle, are several thinner subsidiary columns. These are the singing stones. When you tap them gently with your thumb, each one rings out with a distinct, clear, metallic note. One pillar chimes a deep sa, the fundamental tone of the Indian musical scale. The next answers with a higher ri, then ga, then ma. Together, they form a complete octave, a stone xylophone built 5 centuries ago. The sound is not a dull thud of rock. It is a pure, bell-like tone that hangs in the air, a note of music born from solid granite. The craftsmanship this required is almost beyond comprehension. The sculptors, known as Esthapathes, were not just artists, they were master acousticians. They had to select the perfect stone, likely a specific type of resonant granite or soapstone. Then, with nothing but hand tools, they carved each pillar to an exact thickness and height, knowing that a millimeter's difference would change its pitch. They tuned the stone as meticulously as a luthier tunes a violin, shaving and testing until the pillar sang the correct swara or musical note. This was not decorative whimsy. It was precision engineering on a monumental scale. But why? What was the purpose of building a temple that you could play? One compelling theory is devotional. Imagine a group of musicians and dancers performing in the hall during a festival. The stone pillars themselves could have been incorporated into the music. Priests or designated temple musicians might have moved around the columns, striking them with small mallets in rhythm with the singers and drummers. The temple would have literally joined the orchestra, its very bones resonating in harmony with the human-made music. This would have created an immersive, all-encompassing sonic experience where the boundary between the man-made offering and the temple's divine response completely dissolved. The music came from everywhere, the instruments, the voices, and the stones of God's own house. There is another, more pragmatic theory that speaks to the builder's profound wisdom. These musical pillars may have served as a vibrational diagnostic tool, an ancient form of structural health monitoring. A temple is a living entity subject to earthquakes, settling foundations, and the relentless wear of centuries. If a pillar developed a hidden crack or its foundation shifted, its resonant frequency would change. The note it produced when struck would go flat or become dull and muted. By routinely tapping the pillars and listening to their song, temple caretakers could have performed a simple, non-destructive test. A change in the music was an early warning sign, a call for repair before a minor flaw became a catastrophic failure. In this view, the singing stones were a brilliant fusion of art, science, and devotion, a way to ensure the temple's physical integrity through the beauty of its sound. The pillars did not just make music for worship, they sang the ongoing health of the sacred structure itself, a permanent prayer for permanence encoded in vibration. From the carved musical pillars of India, we journey to the most iconic silent structure of them all. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a monument of perfect geometry, a mountain of stone built with a precision that defies its age. For centuries, its secrets have been locked away, not in hidden texts, but in the angles of its passageways and the dimensions of its chambers. And at the very heart of this geometric puzzle lies a room of stark, powerful simplicity, the king's chamber. It is a stark contrast to the pyramid's outer bulk. This is not a large space. It is a rectangular room built entirely from immense blocks of polished red granite, a stone known for its incredible density and acoustic properties. The walls, the floor, the ceiling all are solid granite. The air inside is still and heavy, For all its fame, the chamber is conspicuously empty, holding only a massive, lidless granite sarcophagus. It feels less like a tomb and more like a machine made of stone. This emptiness has fueled endless speculation. What was this room truly for? One provocative theory, moving beyond traditional archaeology, suggests it was never intended for a body but for a vibration. It proposes the king's chamber was engineered as a cosmic resonator, a device for harnessing specific frequencies. The numbers are compelling. The chamber's dimensions, when analyzed, reveal ratios that correspond to fundamental mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. More strikingly, some researchers have calculated that the chamber itself, given its size and the sonic properties of granite, has a primary resonant frequency. That frequency, they argue, is close to a very special number, approximately 136 Hz. This is not a random tone. In the controversial field of Earth frequency study, some point to a natural, ultra-low pulse generated by our planet's electromagnetic field, known as the Schumann resonance. While the primary Schumann resonance is around 7.83 Hz, far below human hearing, its harmonics' mathematical multiples rise into the audible range. One of these harmonics falls strikingly close to the proposed resonant frequency of the king's chamber. Could the pyramid builders have been tuning their structure to the very heartbeat of the Earth itself? The idea is intoxicating. It suggests a civilization with a profound understanding of geophysics and acoustics, constructing a granite-lined chamber to amplify and perhaps even interact with the planet's own vibrational energy. Imagine standing in that room during some lost ritual with chanting or drumming that matched this frequency. The granite walls would have come alive, the sound swelling into a physical force, a hum synchronized with the earth. It transforms the chamber from a silent tomb into a kind of spiritual battery, charged by planetary resonance. Of course, mainstream archaeology treats this theory with deep skepticism. There is no hieroglyphic text, no direct evidence from Giza that speaks of acoustic science or Earth frequencies. The sarcophagus, skeptics rightly note, is exactly that, a coffin placed in a burial chamber within a funerary complex. The resonant frequencies could be a coincidence of the chamber's practical dimensions, a happy accident of stonework rather than intentional design. The divide between these views is vast. Yet the mystery persists precisely because the pyramid's construction is so unnervingly precise. The builders went to extraordinary lengths to quarry, transport, and fit these incredibly hard granite blocks with seams thinner than a credit card. Why use this acoustically superb material if sound was of no concern? Why create such a stark, resonant cavity in a structure otherwise filled with sand and rubble? The what-if scenario endures because it attempts to answer the why behind the mind-boggling how. It offers a purpose for the precision. Whether you see it as fringe speculation or a lost truth, the theory underscores a central theme. Across the ancient world, from Malta to Mexico, we find cultures obsessed with the marriage of stone and sound. The Great Pyramid, in its silent majesty, represents the ultimate expression of that obsession. It challenges us to listen not just for echoes, but for a frequency we have perhaps forgotten how to hear. The silent precision of Giza finds a wild, organic echo on the misty green hills of Ireland. Here, over 5,000 years ago, a farming community moved mountains of earth and stone to build Newgrange. From the outside, it appears as a massive, grass-covered mound, a gentle hillock holding a secret. A single, narrow passage of towering stone slabs leads deep into the heart of the darkness, ending in a cruciform chamber, a space shaped like a cross with 3 small side recesses. For most of the year, this inner sanctum is a place of profound quiet and utter blackness. But for a few precious minutes around the dawn of the winter solstice, something miraculous happens. A slender beam of sunlight, channeled through a perfectly engineered opening above the entrance called a roof box, pierces the long tunnel. It crawls across the stone floor, finally flooding the central chamber with a golden light that announces the sun's return, the promise of life reborn. This celestial alignment is the monument's most famous feature, a Stone Age calendar of breathtaking accuracy, but the light show was only part of the ritual. Recent acoustic studies inside that ancient chamber have revealed its other voice. The cramped, stone-walled space with its high, corbelled roof possesses a powerful acoustic signature. It resonates strongly at very low frequencies around the range of a deep male chant or the thump of a hand drum. In that enclosed, resonant cavity, sound would not simply travel. It would swell. A single voice could fill the space, becoming layered and dense, the vibrations lingering in the air and transferring directly into the bones of the standing stones. Now reconstruct the scene. A small group of elders or priests gathers in the pitch-black chamber in the dead of winter, hours before dawn. The air is freezing, thick with the smell of damp earth and cold stone. As the moment of solstice approaches, they begin a low, rhythmic chant, a drum beating a slow, steady pulse. The sound waves strike the hard, irregular surfaces of the chamber stones. Instead of being absorbed, the specific frequencies of their ritual music are captured and amplified by the room's natural resonance. The chant gains a booming undertone. The drumbeat seems to multiply, echoing back from the shadows in the recesses. The sound becomes a physical presence, a pressure in the chest that matches the rising anticipation. Then the first sliver of sunlight stabs through the roof box. As the light creeps slowly toward them, illuminating carved spirals on the stones, the sensory experience reaches its peak. The rebounding light meets the rebounding sound. The visual spectacle of the sun's rebirth is married to an overwhelming auditory vibration. The stones themselves seem to hum with the energy of the returning sun. In that moment, the participants are not just observing a solar event. They are feeling it, immersed in a symphony of light and sound engineered by their ancestors. The resonance transformed the chamber from a passive observatory into an active instrument. It made the intangible concept of solar rebirth into something you could hear and feel vibrating in your very core. A sensory proof that the world was indeed turning back toward life. The stones of Newgrange were placed to capture a returning sun, but in the hills of southeastern Turkey, an even older mystery stands silent. Göbekli Tepe rewrites human history. Built over 11,000 years ago, a staggering 7 millennia before the Great Pyramid, this is not a settlement or a village. It is the world's first known temple, constructed by hunter-gatherers who had not yet invented pottery, writing, or the wheel. What they did build were circles of stone so massive, so deliberate, that they force us to reconsider the very dawn of civilization. The site is a series of enclosures, each one a ring of immense T-shaped limestone pillars, many weighing over 10 tons. These pillars are not crude monoliths. They are smoothed, shaped, and intricately carved with elaborate reliefs of animals, snakes, foxes, cranes, and scorpions, frozen in stone from a forgotten world. The pillars are set into solid stone benches that form the walls of the enclosures, creating intimate, circular spaces that were deliberately buried not long after their use, sealed for millennia. Standing inside one of these excavated circles, you are surrounded by a stone bestiary under an open sky. While we lack the detailed acoustic studies of later sites, the architecture itself suggests a powerful sonic intention. These were enclosed spaces walled in by stone and earth. The surfaces are hard, flat limestone. Sound within them would not have escaped easily. It would have been trapped, bouncing between the parallel pillars and the surrounding bench walls. A chant, a shout, or the rhythmic beat of a drum on that stone bench would have created a complex, reverberant soundscape. The very shape of the pillars, their broad, flat faces, would have acted as sound reflectors, while the spaces between them would have caused diffraction, scattering the noise into a rich, immersive texture. Imagine a gathering at the dawn of agriculture. Several dozen people, perhaps from scattered hunter-gatherer bands, converge at this sacred site. Inside one of these stone circles, lit by firelight that makes the carved beast seem to move, a ritual begins. There are no written prayers, no standardized liturgy. There is only the human body, voice, and rhythm. A shaman starts a rhythmic chant, clapping hands or striking the stone bench with a staff. Others join, stamping feet, slapping thighs, adding their voices in cascading calls. In that enclosed ring, the sound multiplies. It becomes a wall of vibration, a shared pulse that rises from the ground and echoes off the monoliths. The individual is swallowed by the collective sound. This sonic bonding would have been a primary tool for forging social cohesion among groups with no cities, no kings, and no written laws. The shared, overwhelming acoustic experience created a temporary, powerful unity, a feeling of being part of something larger than the clan, connected by the very air shaking in their chests. The animal carvings add another layer. These were not decorative, they were potent symbols, perhaps totems or spirit guides. The rituals may have involved mimicking the sounds of these animals, the hiss of a snake, the cry of a crane, the growl of a fox. In the acoustic chamber of the circle, those imitated calls, amplified and echoed by the stone, would have blurred the line between human and beast, between the community and the wild world they depended upon. Through rhythm and resonant sound, they could have felt themselves invoking the spirit of the hunt, the essence of the animals they revered and relied upon for survival. Göbekli Tepe's sonic landscape was likely the glue of a pre-agricultural society, using engineered space and collective noise to build the first spiritual community, making the intangible bonds of belief something you could hear and feel vibrating in your teeth. The stone circles of prehistory gave way to domes that touched heaven. Centuries after Göbekli Tepe was buried and half a world away, another civilization sought to build a space where Earth met the divine, not with monoliths under an open sky, but with a floating ceiling of light and sound. In the heart of Constantinople, now Istanbul, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian completed a building in the year 537 that would define sacred architecture for a millennium, the Hagia Sophia. Its name means holy wisdom, and to step inside is to understand why. Your eye is pulled irresistibly upward, past walls of polished marble to the crown of the structure, a colossal dome 180 feet high that seems to hover weightlessly on a ring of windows. Sunlight pours through these windows, illuminating the golden mosaics until the entire interior shimmers, giving the dome the appearance of a heaven suspended by a chain of light. But the true miracle of the Hagia Sophia is not just how it looks, but how it sounds. If you were to stand in the center of that vast nave and clap your hands just once, the sound would not come back as a sharp echo. Instead, it would bloom. It would swell into a rich, rolling reverberation that lasts for an astonishing 11 seconds or more before finally fading into silence. This is not an empty hall echo. This is a carefully crafted sonic environment, a phenomenon modern acousticians call a very long reverberation time. For the Byzantine liturgy, this acoustic property was everything. Imagine the space filled with thousands of worshippers, the air hazy with incense. A choir of men begins a chant, a slow, modal melody with deep, sustained notes. In an ordinary room, the voices of the singers would be distinct, one beginning as another ends. But under the great dome of the Hagia Sophia, something magical happens. The sound from their voices travels upward, striking the vast, curved interior surface of the dome. Instead of being absorbed, it is reflected back down, but slowly, spreading out across the entire space. The notes do not stop when the singers take a breath. They linger, blending into one another, layering and overlapping. A single line of chant becomes a thick tapestry of sound, a continuous, ethereal drone that seems to have no single source. It becomes a sonic cloud, filling the entire volume of the building, making it feel as though the music is emanating from the very air and stone around you. This is the dome that sings. The builders of the Hagia Sophia, though they lacked our scientific vocabulary, possessed a profound intuitive grasp of what we now term architectural acoustics. They understood empirically that hard, smooth surfaces like marble and plaster reflected sound, and that massive, enclosed volumes allowed it to persist. More importantly, they understood the power of curvature. A flat ceiling or wall can create sharp echoes and dead spots places where sound is focused or missing. But the gentle, soaring curve of a dome acts as a perfect diffuser. It scatters sound waves evenly, distributing them throughout the space below. There are no acoustic shadows, no places where the chant falls silent. Every worshipper, from the emperor in the gallery to the common citizen on the floor, was bathed in the same immersive, uniform blanket of sacred sound. The auditory experience was designed to be a perfect match for the visual splendor. The shimmering gold mosaics of Christ and the angels presented a vision of heavenly glory to the eyes. The endless, blending resonance of the chant presented that same glory to the ears. The sound itself became a theological argument. It was diffuse, omnipresent, and overwhelming, a sensory metaphor for the glory of God, something that could not be pinpointed to a single location, but that encompassed and filled all of creation. In the Hagia Sophia, architecture was not just a container for worship. The building itself was a participant in the liturgy, its great stone lungs breathing the music of heaven back to the faithful below, convincing them through sheer physical sensation that they were standing at the very crossroads of the earthly and the divine. The dome of Hagia Sophia breathes for 11 seconds because of what it is made from. Every sacred space we have visited, from the granite king's chamber to the limestone Hypogeum, shares this fundamental secret. Their power is not just in their shape but in their substance. Ancient builders did not use stone merely because it was strong or available. They chose specific stones because of how they sang. Limestone, granite, and marble share a critical acoustic property. They are incredibly dense and non-porous. When a sound wave strikes their polished surface, it does not sink in and get absorbed. It reflects back almost entirely like light off a mirror. This creates those long, lingering reverberations, the sustained notes that turn a whisper into a chorus and a chant into a physical presence. Modern building materials work very differently. Drywall, acoustic tile, carpet, and insulation are designed to do the opposite. They are soft, porous, and fibrous, specifically engineered to soak up sound waves, to deaden noise and create quiet, intimate spaces. We build for sonic privacy. The ancients built for sonic publicity. They wanted every utterance to be amplified, shared, and sustained. They were constructing giant musical instruments, and stone was their chosen medium. This was a deliberate selection process. In Malta, they carved into the living limestone bedrock, knowing its properties intimately. In Egypt, they went to extraordinary effort to quarry and transport granite hundreds of miles for the king's chamber, bypassing easier sandstone. In India, sculptors sought out specific resonant granite or soapstone to tune their musical pillars. This was not random. It was the application of a deep empirical knowledge. Through generations of trial and error, listening to how different stones responded to chant, drum, and voice, these cultures learned which rocks rang true and which fell flat. They learned how to shape them, polishing surfaces to increase reflection, carving specific thicknesses to tune pillars, and creating hollow chambers to trap and swirl the vibration. The building itself became the instrument, and the material was its voice. A temple was not a silent sculpture you looked at. It was a resonant body you listened to and felt, its very stones participating in the ritual, turning architecture into an experience that vibrated in your chest long after the priest had fallen silent. This leaves us with a profound and unresolved question. Were these temples and chambers intentionally designed as acoustic instruments, or are we simply hearing echoes of our own imagination? The skeptical view offers a compelling and grounded counterargument. It suggests that what we perceive as sonic mastery is largely a happy accident of survival. Ancient builders, especially those working with stone, had one primary goal: to make structures that would last. durable construction naturally favors hard, dense, non-porous materials like limestone and granite, which just so happen to be excellent sound reflectors. The grand, enclosed spaces of temples and tombs were often necessary for their ritual or funerary function, and such spaces naturally create reverberation. Furthermore, we suffer from a powerful case of survivorship bias. The buildings that have lasted thousands of years are the ones made of stone. Countless wooden temples, thatch-roofed shrines, and mud brick sanctuaries have vanished. If we could study them, their acoustics would likely be very different, far more dampened and quiet. From this perspective, the echoing chambers of Malta or the long reverberation in Hagia Sophia are simply unavoidable side effects of building something monumental and permanent. The skeptic argues we are projecting modern acoustic science onto ancient minds that were concerned with cosmology, not concert halls. Yet, the case for intentional design is equally powerful, built on a pattern of evidence that feels too consistent to ignore. It is one thing for a single stone room to resonate by chance. It is another to find the same principle applied with startling precision across continents and millennia by cultures with no possible contact. The resonant frequencies are not random. They often align with the fundamental range of the human voice or the beat of a ritual drum. More tellingly, these acoustic effects are consistently located in the most ritually significant spots: the innermost sanctum, the oracle's chamber, the central tomb, the space directly before the idol. At Göbekli Tepe, the stone circles create an enclosed arena perfect for collective sound. At Chichen Itza, the Quetzal bird echo is produced only at the base of the main staircase, the focal point of worship. In Indian temples, the musical pillars are in the hall meant for dance and music, not hidden in a utility corridor. This strategic placement suggests a deliberate choice. Perhaps the strongest clues come from the cultures themselves, from the fragments of their own understanding that have survived. While the builders of the Hypogeum left no written records, later traditions are more revealing. The Sanskrit texts of Vastu Shastra explicitly discuss the importance of sound and proportion in sacred architecture. Greek philosophers like Pythagoras wrote of the music of the spheres, a belief that celestial bodies moved in harmonic ratios, a concept that could easily translate to harmonic ratios in stone. Ethnographic studies of modern indigenous cultures that use sound in ritual provide a living window into how these acoustic principles might have been understood intuitively. When a shaman in a resonant cave describes the stones singing with the spirits, he is not speaking in metaphor alone. He is describing a physical experience engineered by his ancestors. This debate is the very heart of the mystery. It asks us to decide whether we are listening to the forgotten science of the ancients or merely to the enduring voice of the stones themselves, speaking a language we are desperate to understand. The debate over intention versus accident is fascinating, but it misses the most compelling part of the story, the human experience inside these spaces. Why would a culture invest generations of labor to shape a stone room that hums? The answer lies not in the architecture, but in us. Our own biology holds the key. The field of psychoacoustics studies how sound physically and psychologically affects the human mind and body, and its findings offer a powerful why for these ancient designs. Certain sounds do not just enter our ears, they command our nervous systems. Take rhythmic drumming, a universal feature of ancient ritual. A steady, repetitive beat at a specific tempo, especially when amplified and reflected by stone walls, can entrain our brainwaves. This means the electrical pulses in our brains begin to synchronize with the external rhythm. Fast drum beats might induce alertness or excitement, but slower, monotonous rhythms in the range of 4 to 8 beats per second can gently pull the brain from its normal, busy beta state down into alpha or even theta states. These are the brainwave patterns associated with deep meditation, daydreaming, and the hypnagogic state just before sleep, a realm of heightened suggestibility, vivid mental imagery, and a feeling of being disconnected from the immediate environment. In other words, a perfect state for a spiritual vision or an oracle's trance. Now, combine that rhythm with the low-frequency resonance we find in places like the Hypogeum's oracle room or the proposed frequency of the king's chamber. Sound waves around 100 to 130 Hz are not just heard, they are felt as vibrations in the chest and abdomen. This somatic sensation triggers a visceral, emotional response, bypassing the logical mind. It can slow the heart rate, lower stress hormones, and create a profound sense of awe or even mild disorientation. When your entire body is vibrating in sync with a deep chant, the boundary between yourself and the surrounding environment begins to blur. You feel part of the sound and thus part of the ritual and the community creating it. Then add the final layer, prolonged reverberation, the hallmark of domes and stone chambers. When a chant or a note lingers in the air for 10 seconds or more, it creates a continuous, enveloping blanket of sound. This constant auditory input can overwhelm the brain's usual processing, leading to a form of sensory overload that paradoxically produces deep calm and focus. There is no silence, no break for the conscious mind to grab onto and reassert itself. You are immersed. This trio of effects, brainwave entrainment from rhythm, visceral impact from low frequencies, and cognitive immersion from reverberation, creates a potent recipe for altered consciousness. For an ancient priest or shaman, this was not a mysterious side effect. It was the entire goal. By engineering spaces that guaranteed these psychoacoustic outcomes, they could reliably guide participants toward a shared transcendent experience. They could make the intangible tangible, the feeling of unity with the group, the sensation of a divine presence, the visionary trance state. These were not left to chance or individual willpower. They were built into the stones, a technology for shaping human perception itself. This knowledge granted spiritual leaders incredible influence, a way to forge social cohesion and reinforce belief through the most direct channel possible, the body's own response to vibration. The temples were not just houses for gods, they were carefully tuned instruments for navigating the inner landscape of the human mind. The silent stones now have a voice thanks to a new science listening for echoes of the past. This is the field of archaeoacoustics, a discipline that merges archaeology with the physics of sound to unlock what ancient spaces truly sounded like. Researchers are no longer just looking at ruins, they are listening to them, using technology to measure and recreate the acoustic fingerprints these buildings were designed to produce. The primary tool in this sonic archaeology is something called an impulse response recording. The process is elegant in its simplicity. A researcher goes into a site like the Hypogeum of Malta or the King's Chamber in Egypt and produces a sharp, clean sound. A starter pistol crack, a balloon pop, or a specialized speaker emitting a brief burst of full-spectrum noise. This impulse is the acoustic equivalent of a flash of light in a dark room. Sophisticated microphones arrayed throughout the space capture not just the initial pop, but every single reflection, every bounce, and every decay of that sound as it interacts with the stone. This recording becomes a unique acoustic blueprint, a data map of how that specific space transforms sound. It tells scientists the reverberation time, the resonant frequencies, and exactly how a human voice or a drumbeat would be colored and amplified within those walls. This raw data is just the beginning. The next step is where the digital magic happens. Using laser scanners and photogrammetry, teams create exquisitely detailed three-dimensional computer models of the entire site. These are not simple drawings, they are virtual worlds built from millions of data points, replicating every curve, angle, and material property of the original stone. Then, using auralization software, the same technology used to design modern concert halls, researchers can take a clean recording of, say, a conch shell trumpet or a human chant, and process it through the acoustic blueprint of the virtual space. The result is not a guess, It is a scientifically grounded reconstruction of how that sound would have behaved 2,000 or 5,000 years ago. We can put on headphones and stand virtually in the center of a Neolithic tomb and hear a ritual chant swell and resonate exactly as the builders intended. This technology transforms speculation into sensory experience, giving us hard data to separate accidental acoustics from intentional design. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from the high Andes of Peru. At Chavín de Huanta, a temple complex built over 3,000 years ago, archaeologists discovered a network of underground canals and ducts. Initially thought to be for drainage or water supply, an acoustic analysis revealed something far more intriguing. Researchers, including teams from Stanford University, used impulse responses and modeling to demonstrate that these ducts were not for water but for sound. They acted as primitive but highly effective acoustic conduits. When a conch shell trumpet, or pututu, was blown in certain courtyards, the sound would travel through these stone tubes and emerge in other parts of the temple complex, disembodied and distorted. The effect would have been disorienting and awe-inspiring, making it seem as though the temple itself, or the deities within it, were communicating. The data showed the ducts were engineered to carry specific frequencies, supporting the theory that the Chavín priests used this hidden sound system to create auditory illusions and control the ritual experience. This is not a happy accident of plumbing. It is a clear example of designed acoustic architecture. Across the Atlantic, the enigmatic stones of Stonehenge have also been subjected to this new kind of listening. For years, debates raged about whether the famous circle, especially when it might have had a full ring of lintel stones atop its pillars, had any special acoustic properties. In 2012, a team from the University of Salford built a precise 1/12 scale model of the complete monument based on the latest archaeological data and tested it in an acoustic chamber. Their findings were definitive. The data showed that the completed stone circle would have acted as a massive sound trap. Sounds made inside the circle would have been reflected back inward by the stones, creating a significant reverberation time within the space, while sounds from outside would have been largely muted. This would have made rituals inside the circle intensely intimate and immersive, the chants and drumbeats swirling and amplifying within the sacred enclosure. The acoustic data provided a physical, measurable reason for the monument's famous architecture, moving beyond pure symbolism to demonstrate a functional design for collective sonic experience. With each impulse response recorded and each digital model rendered, the ancient world grows louder and the quiet genius of its builders becomes unmistakably clear. The data from Chavín de Huanta reveals a temple that was not just built on the earth, but engineered to speak from within it. This pre-Incan site, nestled high in the Peruvian Andes, is a sprawling complex of stone plazas, terraces, and most remarkably, a dark labyrinth of underground passages. For decades, archaeologists puzzled over the purpose of these narrow, windowless galleries and the strange stone-lined ducts that snaked through the foundations. They were too small for people, too elaborate for simple drainage. The answer, when it finally came, was not found by looking, but by listening. This was not a hydraulic system. It was an acoustic network, a hidden sound system carved into the bedrock over 3,000 years ago. The centerpiece of this sonic theater was the conch shell trumpet, known as a pututu. These were not mere noisemakers, carefully crafted from large shells, often with mouthpieces of stone or ceramic. They produced a deep, mournful, and powerful blast that could carry for miles in the thin mountain air. At Chavín, priests did not just blow these trumpets in the open air. They performed in specific, strategic courtyards designed as acoustic launch pads. When a pututu was sounded in one of these sunken plazas, its blast would enter the openings of the stone ducts. The sound would then travel, confined and guided, through the twisting underground channels. It would emerge, distorted and amplified, from vent openings in completely different parts of the temple complex. sometimes from the mouth of a stone jaguar head sculpture or from a hidden niche in a dark corridor. To a pilgrim moving through the torchlit maze above, the effect would have been utterly disorienting. The roar would seem to come from the walls themselves or from beneath their feet, a disembodied voice of the temple. It created an illusion that the building was alive and speaking, that the gods were physically present in the rumble of the stone. This was religious theater of the highest order, a deliberate and sophisticated manipulation of sound to manufacture awe and belief. The priests of Chavin, hidden from view, could orchestrate this auditory spectacle, controlling the emotional experience of the worshippers with the pull of a secret lever or the blast of a shell. The ducts were not random. Acoustic testing shows they were sized and shaped to carry and amplify the specific low frequencies of the pututu, proving an empirical understanding of sound propagation. Here, the ancient mastery of resonance moves from the realm of suggestive possibility into the domain of undeniable fact. This was a culture that did not just use sound, they engineered it, building the whispers of their gods directly into the bones of their mountain. The hidden sound system of Chavin was a masterpiece of engineered awe, but its principles did not vanish with its civilization. They traveled through time, finding a new home in the soaring stone forests of medieval Europe. The Gothic cathedral is the ancient temple's direct descendant, a conscious evolution of the same quest to build heaven on earth through sound. Walk into a place like Notre Dame de Paris or Chartres Cathedral, and you are immediately struck by the silence. But it is a deceptive silence, a pregnant quiet that is the canvas for something immense. Look up. The architecture pulls your gaze along ribbed vaults that stretch like stone branches to impossible heights. The walls are vast expanses of glass and stone, hard, smooth, and reflective. Every surface is designed not for absorption but for reflection. The builders of these monuments, the master masons, were inheritors of an unspoken tradition. They may not have known the oracle room or the Hypogeum, but they understood the same fundamental truth. To create a space for the divine, you must first shape the air within it. Their goal was not the intimate, bone-shaking resonance of a Neolithic tomb. It was something grander, more expansive, a sonic atmosphere that could hold the voices of 1,000 worshippers and transform them into a single, heavenly body of sound. They achieved this through the very essence of Gothic design: height, volume, and hard, parallel surfaces. The long, narrow nave acts as a resonant corridor. The towering vaulted ceiling, often over 100 feet high, creates a vast volume of air. When sound is produced in this space, it has room to travel, to develop, to bloom. The stone and glass provide almost no absorption, so the sound waves bounce back and forth between the parallel walls and the vaults above, layering upon themselves. The result is a reverberation time that can last 8, 10, or even 12 seconds. A single spoken word becomes a blur, a beautiful, indistinct murmur. This was not a flaw in the design, it was the entire point. The Gothic cathedral was acoustically engineered for a specific form of worship, the Gregorian chant. This music is not about sharp rhythms or complex melodies. It is about sustained modal lines sung in unison by a choir of monks. In the cathedral's resonant field, something magical happens to that chant. The individual voices blend into a seamless stream of sound. The sustained notes overlap and reinforce each other, creating a thick, ethereal drone that seems to have no beginning and no end. The architecture itself becomes the final, most powerful member of the choir, adding its own lingering voice to every phrase. The music ceases to feel like a performance from one corner of the building. It becomes an environmental condition, like light pouring through stained glass, something that fills and defines the entire sacred space. You do not just hear the chant, you are immersed in it, wrapped in a continuous blanket of sacred tone that lifts the mind from the earthly to the celestial. This was the intended psychoacoustic effect. The long reverberation, combined with the slow, repetitive rhythms of the chant, would have helped entrain the brainwaves of the congregation, fostering a state of contemplative awe and collective focus. The sound made the theology tangible, creating a sensory experience of God's eternal, encompassing presence. Later, with the introduction of the pipe organ, the cathedral found its ultimate voice. This instrument was literally built into the architecture, its pipes scaled to fill the vast resonant cavity the masons had created. The deep, foundational pedal notes of the organ would activate the lowest resonant frequencies of the building, making the very stonework hum. A full chord from the organ would not strike and fade. It would swell, mix, and hang in the air for half a minute, a physical vibration that you felt in your chest as much as heard with your ears. The organ and the cathedral were one instrument, a machine for generating transcendence built over centuries. This lineage is unmistakable. From the granite chambers of the pyramids to the hollow vimanas of India, from the whispering galleries of the Maya to the echoing domes of Byzantium, and finally to the vaulted naves of Gothic Europe, we see a continuous thread. It is the human pursuit of using architecture to manipulate vibration, to craft soundscapes that alter consciousness and evoke the sacred. The methods and materials evolved, but the core intention remained stubbornly consistent, to build a bridge to the divine not just for the eyes, but for the ears and the whole body. The medieval master mason, laying stone upon stone to achieve a specific reverberation time, was the spiritual heir to the Neolithic shaman who carved a chamber to amplify a drumbeat. They were all acoustic architects, using the physics of their time to answer a timeless human longing. The master masons of Chartres and the shaman priests of Chavin never met, yet they spoke the same silent language of stone and sound. This brings us to a haunting question. Where did this shared expertise come from? Did a secret society of ancient acoustic architects roam the globe, their sophisticated blueprints now turned to dust? Or was this something more organic, born from the human ear and a deep, patient relationship with the natural world? The truth likely lies in a middle ground, a place where intuition and observation crystallized into a repeatable, sacred science. There were no textbooks on resonant frequencies, but there were countless teachers. The first teachers were the landscapes themselves. Before a single stone was carved, our ancestors lived in a world rich with natural acoustics. They heard how a shout echoed differently across a lake than it did in a narrow canyon. They felt the deep, thrumming silence inside a vast cave and noticed how a whisper could travel with eerie clarity along a smooth cliff face. They observed how certain rock formations sang when the wind struck them, or how water dripping in a cavern created complex, rhythmic patterns. These were not just curiosities, they were profound experiences, demonstrations that the earth itself had a voice. The first ritual spaces may have been these very locations. A particular canyon where chants seemed amplified, a specific cave where drumbeats made the walls hum. The architecture came later as an attempt to recreate and perfect these natural sonic wonders. The knowledge was then refined through generations of what we might call sacred trial and error. A community builds a ceremonial mound. They notice that when they chant inside, the sound is deadened. They build another, adjusting the shape of the chamber or the entrance, and this time the sound swells. Over decades, then centuries, this empirical data accumulates. The elders, the ritual specialists, become the keepers of this acoustic lore. They learn through direct, bodily experience which shapes make the spirit feel present, which dimensions cause a collective voice to unify, which stones ring true when struck. This was not abstract physics, it was embodied knowledge. It was passed down not in lectures but in practice through the rituals themselves. The correct way to build was encoded in the rituals, and the rituals were validated by the building's acoustic effect. The precise ratios, the specific dimensions that produced the desired resonance, became part of an oral tradition, a set of rules shrouded in myth and symbolism. The golden ratio or pi might not have been calculated on a tablet, but they were discovered in the pursuit of harmonic space, their pleasing proportions found to produce pleasing, powerful sound. The geometry of their temples was this knowledge made permanent. A blueprint written in stone is far more durable than one written on papyrus. The pyramid's slope, the temple's pillar spacing, the dome's curvature, these were the equations. They were the stored data of 1,000 observations, a silent library where the very angles held the instructions for recreating a transcendent experience. So we are not looking at lost science in the modern sense. We are witnessing a different kind of knowing, one that was holistic, experiential, and deeply spiritual. It was the wisdom of the ear and the hand, of listening to the earth and then learning to answer it back in stone. This knowledge was never truly lost because it is built into the places that still, if we listen carefully, have something to teach us. That intuitive knowledge of sound's power never truly disappeared. It simply went quiet for a while, waiting for science to catch up. Today, the same principles that shaped ancient temples are resurfacing in laboratories, clinics, and modern buildings, forging a fascinating bridge between mystical tradition and hard data. We call this field sound therapy or acoustic medicine, and it is giving us a new vocabulary for what the ancients knew in their bones. Practitioners use tools like singing bowls, tuning forks, and deep, resonant gongs. The goal is not entertainment, but entrainment using specific, sustained vibrations to slow brain waves, calm the nervous system, and promote a state of deep relaxation. When you lie down as a singing bowl is struck, its pure tone washing over you, you are experiencing a refined version of the same sonic immersion that once filled the oracle room. Modern studies using EEG machines show these sounds can indeed shift brain activity from busy beta waves to the calmer alpha and theta states associated with meditation and healing. This is not magic, it is measurable psychoacoustics, validating the ancient intuition that certain vibrations can directly alter our state of being. Another modern concept that echoes the past is cymatics, the science of visualizing sound. When sound waves pass through a medium like water or fine sand, they arrange the particles into intricate geometric patterns. A low frequency creates a simple mandala-like circle. A higher, more complex tone generates stunningly elaborate symmetrical shapes. This provides a stunning visual proof of what the ancients could only feel. That sound is a fundamental structuring force. It makes the invisible visible, showing how vibration literally shapes matter. Seeing these patterns, it becomes easier to understand why ancient cultures believed sacred chants could purify a space or harmonize the body. They were sensing the organizing power of resonance. This ancient wisdom is also reshaping the spaces we build today. Architects are now consciously designing for sound in ways that would make the master masons nod in recognition. The world's finest concert halls, like the Berlin Philharmonie, are not just aesthetic marvels, they are giant, carefully tuned instruments. Their shapes, materials, and surfaces are calculated to create the perfect reverberation time, to blend and carry musical notes so every seat receives a rich, full auditory experience. This is the direct descendant of the acoustic precision found at Epidaurus. Beyond performance spaces, this thinking is entering hospitals and wellness centers. Designers are creating healing gardens and meditation rooms with sound-absorbing materials to reduce stressful noise, while incorporating gentle, natural soundscapes or resonant frequencies shown to lower patient anxiety and pain perception. Some forward-thinking offices are even using sound masking, a soft, ambient background frequency, to increase privacy and focus, a practical application of sonic environmental design. We are relearning that our well-being is deeply connected to the soundscape we inhabit. Perhaps the most personal modern echo of this ancient art is the phenomenon of binaural beats. This is an auditory illusion created when you listen to two slightly different tones, one in each ear. Your brain perceives a third rhythmic pulse that equals the difference between the two frequencies. If you listen to a tone of 300 Hz in one ear and 310 Hz in the other, your brain perceives a 10 Hz beat. Research suggests this perceived beat can encourage your brainwaves to synchronize to that frequency. Listening to binaural beats in the alpha range around 8 to 12 Hz may promote relaxation, while those in the theta range might aid meditation or creativity. It is a digital, headphone-delivered form of the brainwave entrainment that ancient rituals achieved with drums and chanting in resonant stone chambers. The technology is new, but the destination in the mind is very, very old. All of this modern exploration does something remarkable. It does not diminish the accomplishments of the ancient builders. It elevates them. It suggests they were not merely superstitious people fooled by echoes. They were pioneering researchers in human consciousness, using the most advanced technology they had, stone and geometry, to explore the interface between vibration and perception. They discovered through patient observation what we are now confirming with oscilloscopes and MRI machines. That sound is a profound tool for shaping human experience. Their temples were the original laboratories for this work, so the next time you feel calmed by a piece of music or soothed in a quiet, well-designed space, you are touching the edge of that ancient understanding. The stones may have fallen silent, but the frequency they discovered still resonates within us, a timeless hum connecting the sacred past to the healing potential of our future. From the engineered echoes of Delphi to the hidden sound ducts of Chavin, this journey reveals a map of the world written in vibration. Across continents and millennia, the same profound discovery was made again and again. A temple was not merely a shelter for a statue or a gathering place for prayers. It was a carefully tuned instrument, an immersive sensory environment designed to do one thing perfectly: connect humanity to the divine through the most direct channel possible, the physics of sound itself. These builders were the world's first acoustic engineers, though they would not have used the term. They were masters of a sacred science, shaping stone to shape consciousness. They understood that to truly experience the sacred, you could not just see it, you had to hear it and feel it vibrating in your chest. The visual spectacle of a pyramid or a cathedral was only half the design. The other half was the sonic atmosphere it created, the lingering chant, the disembodied whisper, the resonant hum that turned individual wonder into collective transcendence. They used the predictable behavior of sound waves to manufacture the feeling of the unpredictable, the presence of something greater than themselves. This was not superstition. It was a brilliant, intuitive application of natural law, a technology of awe built from geometry, material, and empty space. The stones were not silent monuments to forgotten gods. They were active participants in the ritual, their very shapes singing the prayers back to the people. So the next time you stand in an ancient place, do not just look at the carvings or admire the height of the arches. Close your eyes for a moment and listen. Listen for the ghost of a reverberation, for the memory of a chant that once swelled in that air. What other secrets might these ancient stones still be holding, waiting for us to learn how to listen once more? Share your thoughts on these sonic mysteries in the comments below, and subscribe to join us as we continue exploring history's hidden depths.